The next speaker is Dr. Samke Ngcobo. Dr. Samke Ngcobo is a medical doctor who is living with mental illness, and she is going to talk to us a little bit about her journey, about advocacy. And she's written a book which I think has done exceptionally quite well. I've seen some of the stuff on social media about that, and I think I'm hoping that she'll be talking a little bit about that, and everyone here will try and get hold of that book and buy it. So I think at the end of the invited presentations, we're really, really excited that you could able to join us, and we want to hear from you about your experiences. So can we please welcome Dr. Samke Ngcobo to the podium. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. It's such a pleasure to be here. I know by the time you're the last person to speak, you're thinking, I hope everyone is awake. So I'm glad all eyes are open. So I'm Samke Ngcobo. And I thought I'd start here. In many ways, this is a full circle moment. There's been many moments in my life that have put me in those kinds of, to say that, but this is one of them. What brings me in this room is not that I'm Dr. Samke Ngcobo. It's this person. This person had emerged from a psychotic episode, and this photo was taken 6 weeks after I had had my first episode. I was 14 years old, and this is 22 years ago. This person was lost, confused, and completely voiceless, which is why I entitled my talk, There's No Better Advocacy Than Self-Advocacy. When I stand in front of you, I stand up from a belief that says the best storyteller about mental health issues is the person living with it. Many things were done for me when I was sick at this time, but no one listened to what I had to say. No one listened to what I was feeling. So my parents did their best. I got the optimal care, otherwise I wouldn't be standing in front of you. And as Dr. Parker was speaking, I was so touched because I thought the difference between me and the people in those hospitals, there's not much difference because it's a set of circumstances that we were born into, and that's what led to different parts of our lives happening the way that they did. I had to tie up my life not understanding what had happened to me, hearing voices that other people could not hear, seeing things that other people could not see. And I couldn't even explain what was happening to me. Things had to spiral out of control when I was trying to run out of home. And then my parents thought something must be wrong. I was rushed to hospital, and that was my first contact with mental health care services. So by the way, the initial plan was to become a teacher. And here I am as a medical doctor. And that is because of the trajectory of my life after this point. What I wish happened at that time was for people to understand my confusion. I was labeled as demon-possessed, called the weakest link. I was called somebody who's a problem, and people thought I was bewitched. She's too clever, and I'd like to still believe that. Fast forward to now. I could give a glamorous story about my life and say I was an summa cum laude. I did not finish in record time thanks to bipolar disorder. So the name of my condition is bipolar disorder. And many of you have seen a patient with bipolar disorder. And my prognosis was quite poor. So I thought I was that mild, can get away with it kind of bipolar disorder patient. But the reality is that I was sick so much and so severely. My psychiatrist, the current one I have, put it well when she said, Samke, when you are well, you are well. But when you are ill, you are extremely unwell. And that speaks to the impact of the service that each and every one of you provides to the care of your patients. I was speaking to a colleague in the dining room, and we were speaking about the fact that the patient has to be part of the care be part of their management. And that's what many people fail to remember, is that in the management room, it's not doctor, and patient, but it's patient with doctor for the well-being of the patient. I stand in front of you with a record and hopefully the end of over 10 admissions to psychiatric facilities. The most traumatic one was in a state facility as an involuntary mental health care user. So some chords were struck as Dr. Parker was speaking. I had always enjoyed the luxury of private health care. I did not know any better. The queues, the catering, fantastic, until I experienced being behind the bars of a security guard and feeling as if you're a prisoner and your family seeing you in that way. One of the things that was a turning point for me during that point was realizing that my illness is not only about me, but it impacts the people around me as well, and they are equally a part of that journey. So a lot has happened between this point and now. It was not my plan, not my dream. I was just minding my own business, studying for a medical degree, did not think I'm going to speak in conferences. That was not the big goal, basically. But when I realized that it's so easy to be unseen as a mentally ill person, I decided to take it upon myself. So with these passion projects that I'm going to speak about, it will seem as if they're easy when you write them down, and I came with the best intentions thinking I have this grand idea. But you can have a grand idea with people who are very blank and staring at you. So I just decided to call some nonprofit organizations, telling them that I'd like to be a part of them, and they thought, okay, you can follow us on social media, some of them would say. And I thought, no, I want to be a part of you. And then I realized that what I'm looking for is in my mind. Not everyone will understand what you're trying to achieve. So I then decided that I have to take matters upon my hands and be the change that I wanted to see. So it was a common realization, not common. It was a realization that struggling is part of our human experience, and it is common to every single one of us. As much as we can all be put together here, there's something that we're all navigating. So Sisters for Mental Health was birthed. So the way I was so clueless, to be honest, with this passion project of mine, I just started a WhatsApp group, then I added people into the group, and I labeled, as you would start a WhatsApp group in your wards, and as you'd start a WhatsApp group, named it Sisters for Mental Health, and off I went. And people were like, have you registered? And I thought, oh, because that wasn't the plan. But I realized the hunger and the need for connection, but not initially. So the journey began, and I started the WhatsApp group. The weather was not permitting. The turnout was 10, including myself. So it was a humbling experience. And I thought, let me go back to the drawing board. I was then paralyzed by fear and anxiety of, what if I start again and no one responds to this big passion project that I want? So the need I felt was the need for connection. And I felt that people want to be in safe spaces so they can speak and talk. I hadn't thought of formalities at the time of having multidisciplinary team involvement. I just thought people want a space where they can walk and connect and see what comes next. The second time I sent this invitation, I couldn't control the turnout, so to speak. So my partner in crime and I formed a banner, sent this invitation, left it open to plan. No space for RSVPs or anything like that, just relied on turnout. What I realized during that time, I asked a colleague of mine, and all of it mostly has been on the generous provision of time of colleagues. Besides connection, one of the biggest things that I believe in Sisters for Mental Health is the need for psychoeducation. We take for granted when we sit in professional rooms and we're speaking about mental health education, but how does it reach the people? And creating these connection hikes and other gatherings that I'll speak about, I wanted to create an environment that is non-threatening and inviting for people to come and connect and talk about issues without feeling as if there's a barrier or an intimidation. The reality is that not everybody is going to show up to a conference on a Saturday afternoon and leave their time. So I realized that people have to come and play in spaces where they want to connect. So we had the hike. This is just one of the hikes that we had. And one of the psychiatrists was just so kind, came after the hike to teach basic things that we take for granted: prevention, primary, secondary prevention of mental illness, things that one may think are easy to understand, but other people don't even know how to articulate. Understanding the people's feelings and emotions. And by realizing the questions, the type of questioning, I realized that there's a lot of work and homework cut out. And then I realized that I need to still continue working and planning and thinking about what to do as Sisters for Mental Health. One of the big questions that I've had to grapple with, for example, is why sisters? There's men's health. And I've just been tongue-tied about that because it was a hiking group. And now you're thinking, you've formed a name, you've registered it, what now? So these are one of the things that has just been the stumbling blocks along the way. This is just one of the other hikes that we've had as a group. And just looking at sometimes the numbers, how they've started, the weather, and that's when I realized that more formalities need to take place. And one of the things when I speak about being an advocate and starting, it's to start somehow, to start somewhere. If I had waited for the conditions to start and be perfect, I think I'd still be planning it and planning it and planning it and planning it. So I'm learning along the way, making mistakes, not unethical mistakes, making mistakes along the way, so long as I'm starting and building from what I am, trying to have a team. Some team members come, some team members go, others will join, others are passionate, but they don't have the same vision. So you have to vet people along the way. So it's been a learning curve and very much out of my comfort zone, so to speak. So not everybody likes hiking. Not everybody likes walking. I need to know how many people to expect in order to plan accordingly. The speakers that come, so we decided to have more formality. So this is one of our seminars. I hosted my first psychoeducational seminar last year, where basically the aim is to have 4 speakers, and very important to that list of speakers, there has to be a person with lived experience with mental illness, because without the person with mental illness stable, then I believe that having people with mental illness in the room is very important to further the conversation, because speaking our language is what furthers things more. So at this talk, we had a psychologist, occupational therapist, we had entertainment in terms of like poetry related to mental health, mental wellness, and then we had somebody with lived experience who had been speaking about their journey. And the theme of the day last year was seeking help. Something very mundane, because I didn't want to have a threatening terminology to it, because there's still a lot of stigma that we can't deny related to mental health and mental illness. So the brief for the speakers was related to suicide risk, but we don't want to have a flyer saying that so that it intimidates people and puts them off. But the speakers had the brief to know that this is the issue that we are currently dealing with and would like to address. And it was a very, very warm, safe environment, had exercises, very connected. It was a lovely engagement. And one of the things that's been a challenge, because it's a nonprofit, is the fact that you want to provide this at a subsidized fee for people to be able to come, but that ends up taking from you personally. So it's quite a balance, and I know that in due time the support will come, but sometimes the support comes at a time, not that when you don't need it, but when you need it most, it doesn't come at that time. So this is the one we had this year, navigating difficult emotions. So we try to say that, for example, colors of joy, to say rainbow, something lighthearted, to just give a theme to the day. But we always give a brief to the speakers within the multidisciplinary team about teaching. And one of the themes was related to parenting. So some parents were there, the psychologist was speaking about how our upbringing impacts the people who we become. So, I'm very grateful for the support that I've had for people within the multidisciplinary team who understand the vision, because sometimes you have a vision and you can't articulate it, or people can't grasp what you're trying to say to them. So you just have to go and see, go with people and see how the response is, and pray for the best, basically. So Sisters for Mental Health is still growing. I wish to have more events more regularly, more hikes, but it is still a funding issue in terms of, support. But I've loved the fact that there's that curiosity. I'm always being asked about it. There's an interest about it. And I look forward to having more and more engagements in that regard. One of the work that I've been invited about, or birthed as well, is related to vocal mentality. So vocal mentality is a statement of empowerment. It's a statement that I said to myself that I will give voice to my mind. Engage with me by giving voice to your mind. Because oftentimes we become shy. At times I think of other things I've done in terms of the engagements, and I'm astounded by it. I'm humbled by it. But if I were to have waited too long to be empowered, I would never have been able to speak about these things at all. So it's about starting somewhere. It's about engaging with other people and collaborate with other people. I've been grateful to engage with other organizations such as SADC, such as South African Federation for Mental Health, where they've seen the value of the work that I do. And they've invited me to maybe contribute to their things. And it's been something that has been validating in a major way. Because when I started out, I thought, am I making sense to them? Not that they were not in any way fantastic or anything, but I had to also be clear on what my vision was. And I've learned along the way that sometimes you just have to begin where you are, and people will catch up. And it's been fantastic to see that sense of working together and understanding of the work that I do. I've engaged a lot with the corporate community over the years. They've been very amazing. One of the things that I've found them to speak about is the high performance culture communities, and also related to stigma, is that I may take for granted, I definitely don't take for granted though, that I'm a medical doctor living with bipolar disorder, a condition that is debilitating. But for them, at times in those environments, they don't always see someone like them that they see. They sometimes see a mentally ill person being perceived in a certain way. So they can't connect that you can be a mentally ill person and still be a functional individual. And that's why oftentimes they ask me to give talks in their companies, and it's been a very amazing experience. And leaders are showing an interest now about issues to how to approach mental illness. HR departments. Recently, I did one of the corporates as well, and they are starting to see that you can be functional. And I always say that I'm not suffering from mental illness, I'm thriving despite it. And there's a difference in saying that, because you can own your truth, and it doesn't have to disempower you. I always say that had I not stood up for that little girl that you saw at the beginning, this conversation would not be happening. I'd be another doctor, minding my own business. But it took a long journey to get to the point that I am. And it's not void of struggles. As recently as 3 years ago, I had one of my worst, if not the worst, relapse that I've had yet to date. I was booked off work for 6 months due to a debilitating psychotic episode, the one that put me in a state facility. So it's been a journey of falling, getting up, falling, getting up, not wanting to get up, waking up at 3 a.m. thinking, did I just say that? Did I just do that? But getting up again. It's not easy navigating a mental illness. And when you find initiatives and you find communities that gather like this, talking about in different parts of the world, then you realize that there's hope for people like me, because if it wasn't for such gatherings, if it wasn't for such conversations, my quality of life would be questionable and my prognosis would be worse. I've always said that working, going to work, coming back, I feel that our work in general, whatever your work is, you are contributing to society. But it became more than that for me after I was in the state facility, and I realized that there's so much more that can be done. So I decided to join Brand South Africa in terms of the mental wellness initiative and became a wellness ambassador in that sense, because I realized that the journey of people with mental illness can be amplified. The voice of people of mental illness can be amplified. And I don't have to wait for the next person. I can take charge of my own narrative and hopefully empower the other person. During COVID-19, it was during my incapacity leave of 6 months, I decided to utilize that time fruitfully and talk about, well, this is not during COVID, sorry, apologies, the later slide. One of the things I'm passionate about is education about mental illness, mental health as well. I was boggled when I saw that young people were able to understand my book and relate to my book and challenge me so much. I've never had such challenging questions like when I did at Kolwani Primary School. And I realized that there's a hunger to understand and understand and know more about mental health and mental wellness. And a language needs to be there for young people as well, because their feelings matter. So this is just one of the engagements I had earlier last year. So earlier this year, I was in one of the high schools as well, invited to be a speaker to address learners about mental health and having it appropriate for their age as well, you know, talking about help-seeking behavior, normalizing the need for getting help, normalizing for saying you're struggling, because I resonated so much, and I spoke to them about this, that I was their age and I wished to have been heard and I wished for that speaking. So to say they are too young to hear about mental health is an invalid conversation in my view, because my illness did not announce itself, it just came. So Reflections of a Convoluted Mind, a journey with my mental illness, was birthed during COVID. If you're on incapacity leave, hopefully none of you have had to be on incapacity leave. You're not working, and it was COVID-19 lockdown. I felt that the narrative of the mentally ill is not fully understood. I had read on textbooks, but I did not find what I was looking for as a mentally ill person. And I decided to create my own story and share my story about my journey with mental illness. I wanted people with mental illness to feel understood. I wanted families to connect. I wanted society to hear it from also a professional perspective without the overbearing jargon that we are guilty of as well. So I just wanted a relatable story that people can relate to and connect with. And so my story was born. And just the thinking around it is Reflections of a Convoluted Mind, a journey with my mental illness. It's to say the convoluted mind is still capable if treated well. You can relate, you can connect. And it is a journey, it's an ongoing one, and it's one that I need to nurture and look after. Thank you so much.
Samke.
Thank you.
Goes on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions? We have enough time for questions. That's better. Okay, we can start.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Hi.
Just checking. I'm Precious Dimba. I'm a second-year registrar at UKZN in psychiatry. Thank you so much, Samke, for the talk. It was really great. I think I share kind of a passion, same passion as you in terms of advocacy, in terms of speaking about mental health care issues. I think every year, once a year, I do this workshop. I was invited by the Rotary Club of Hillcrest, and they had identified that a lot of the children in the local schools have a lot of mental health care issues, and they actually don't know how to talk about them. They don't know who to talk to, where to get help, and things like that. So a friend and I got together and we run these workshops. They do other things as well at that workshop, but we just run a mental health care kind of session for the it's mostly girls, but for the school children. And when I did it this year, we were sitting afterwards and we were reflecting, and we thought that because all of the girls will come with all of these questions about what to do, and where to get help, and we'll provide some of the information for them. But what we found was during the course of the year, or because we do this once a year, during the course of the year, if they encounter problems or they encounter issues, they don't know maybe who to then talk to at that point in time or where to go at that point in time, because you realize that actually mental health care information is very scarce in general. And even though we talk about these things, we say call this number, but maybe you need airtime to be able to call it. Their families may not be able to provide and things like that. So then I was trying to get hold of the principals to see how we can maybe empower the teachers at school and counselors and things like that at school so they can speak about these things, and maybe the girls or or boys, shame, or boys as well, could actually go and contact them because they have easier access to them than they would have to me, for example. And what I found, which was very sad, was when I contacted one of the principals, her response was to me that her children, they know nothing about mental health, they don't have any mental health care issues, and she didn't want to engage with me further on this. So my question is just around that. So as you try and navigate these spaces, I don't know if you have encountered challenges where parents or teachers or people who are supposed to be, I suppose, caring for children are blocking you from giving the information that you need to give. How have you navigated that? Because for me, that's been the struggle. How do I then help those children if now the teachers, the principal, the parents are saying, no, there's no such thing as mental illness. No, my children don't have mental illnesses, and I don't want to engage any further. So I hope you got the question.
Yes, I get
I know
it.
I said a lot.
Thank you.
But it's just really about how do you navigate a situation like that.
Yes.
Right.
So thank you for your question. So when I started the work that I do, I just basically, my website, my platforms basically, I just focused on the work itself, and then oftentimes when I've been called to schools and so on, it's usually but when they've invited me. So I've sent invitations as well via email to head of schools oftentimes, and then if they respond as best as I can. It varies. It varies from schools to school, of course. But I think the biggest thing is focusing on the work itself, and then if people come, they come, and then sending an invitation. Then depending on what the rejection is, I've learned not to personalize the rejection as well. Sometimes people aren't ready. There's times where I've sent an invitation where I'm saying I'd like to offer my time, I'd like to come, and there's no response. And then 3 months later, or 6, or next year, I get a response saying, we'd like for you to come through. So I've learned not to personalize those things. And also, what's been helpful to me is peers, for example, I'd regard you as a peer, for example, to say, let's remain encouraging to one another to know that these things are part of the journey, basically. Let it not discourage the work that you're doing in your space. You'll find that other people who are doing the same work you're doing encounter the same thing, but just try not to personalize it.
Okay, more questions. Let me, Claire was next, and then I'll come to you, and then I'll see you as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Doctor, for sharing your amazing story. I practice as a psychiatrist in Uganda, and you made a point on engaging the patients in the care. I have an example of where that has worked for us. I realized that the patients I was seeing had a very poor adherence to medication. So the system was, if someone was not adherent, we just switch to the monthly depot injection, right? Until I tried to find out, to actually do a small survey from the patients as to why they're actually not taking their medication. Turns out they had fears that we have never addressed. They didn't even seem real fears to us. Majority of the patients said, I don't want to get addicted to the medication. So as a medical doctor, it made no sense to me because I was like, okay, these are not addictive drugs, but only I know that, the patients don't know that. So I included that in my psychoeducation to tell the patients that, as I'm telling you about the illness, this medication is not addictive, and we realized that we were shifting from the monthly depots to now, taking orally, because this fear that didn't seem, to me, it may not feel like a fear because, if you're dealing with symptoms, in my mind, I'm thinking you should be concerned about your symptoms and not necessarily the fear, but it was a very valid fear that the patients had. And just that small change in involving them in their care made a big difference, with adherence. So you're doing a great job, and I want to buy your book. So
I have copies.
I hope to invite you sometime. I do have young people that come to us that when they see a doctor, or I've realized if it's a doctor or a man, because it's usually ladies talking about mental illness, they're more responsive. They feel they get hope somehow. So I think you're doing a good job, and I want to encourage you. Thank you.
And just to add to what you're saying, you're very correct. During medical school, one of my biggest struggles was related to the side effects. I ballooned 30 kilograms in 4 months from a size 26, I think, and I think I became a 40, 42. And at that time, I didn't have the voice that I have, obviously related to this is how I'm feeling, this is why I don't want to take this medication. It was related to the side effect. And they just thought I'm just uncooperative, I don't want to take medication. But I was just frustrated that when I take this medication, I'm finishing a packet of chips in 2 seconds, kind of a thing. And one of the things I've learned along the way in medical school and so on was the patient is part of the managing team. It's part of the MDT, because end of the day, everything that's being done is being done for you, and you need to be a part of the decision making.
Any that side? Can I just for the sake of time, unfortunately running out of time. So Lihle, and then stay. Is it anyone that side? No. Okay.
Thank you, Samke. It's amazing. We're just so inspired, and thank you for gifting us with your story today. I wanted to ask, what are some of your non-negotiable self-care interventions that you always implement?
Okay. Non-negotiable, and I used to think it's a superpower in medical school, so it worked for me then, but it's not conducive now. It's sleep. Sleep is so important. I'm not optimal when I don't sleep well. And I thought it's a superpower that I sleep 2 hours, 3 hours, mania enables you, but end of the day, it catches up with you somehow. So that's one of them. And for the sake of time, I can't think of a second one, but sleep. Thanks.
Thank you, Doctor, for sharing your experience. I'm Dr. Scholar Shaba from Uganda. I'm a psychiatrist, but also a lecturer in the university. And so I see young people in medical school with mental illness, but most especially bipolar disorder. The class that just finished in September, 2 of them were bipolar. So they are brilliant students, of course, brilliant doctors now, But the challenge I see is stigma. And stigma not only from people who don't even know, but from the fellow doctors. I've seen colleagues asking, so you're training these people, but so what after medical school? And then you're like, but they're functioning people, you know. They can achieve things as much as you can. So I wanted to know how you have navigated stigma around mental illness as a medical doctor. Thank you.
Okay. The biggest stigma I've had to overcome that makes me stand in front of all of you is self-stigma. I think when I overcame self-stigma, the rest ceased to matter, so to speak. I had always carried, always been racing against myself, overachieving, overperforming, pushing myself more than I need to, because I knew that I'm carrying this thing called bipolar disorder that I didn't fully understand. It took a public psychotic episode, the one I told you about from 3 years ago, well, not in detail, we don't know time, but it took that one to realize how people can just shift from how they see you, where you become the illness after something like that happening. So that's when my eyes became open to see that I still saw myself as myself, but people no longer saw Samke. So I've had to climb out of that and really reckon with myself. And I highly respect, I'm 1,000% behind the work of psychologists. It's the utmost respect that I have, because psychotherapy has been part of my life for most of my life, and the quality of my life has been critical. It's not just the medication, but psychotherapy as well, to overcome those issues where I can't change what people say or do, but I can choose how I can respond to that.
So I think, Leila, your hand was up. Okay. Can you give it to Prof? Thanks.
Thank you. Wow. You remind me of my mother. So my mother is Africa's first woman pilot, south of the Sahara. She flew in the 60s in the Ghana Air Force. And she had to cope with bipolar disorder all of that time. And her way of coping was to deny that she had the illness, and she had several relapses. Many of you know Sami Ohene here. Sami was her psychiatrist, but Sami was her friend. She refused to call him her psychiatrist. Well, her name was Melody. Melody passed away about 7, 8 years ago. But today we have a building named after her, the Melody. It's the Department of Psychiatry now. And it's because she is an inspiration, we think, for young people who don't want to accept that they have an illness, but maybe to learn about Melody in a really modern building that they're in would give them the courage to try something new and go with meds and therapy. So we'd like you to come.
I'd love to. I'd love to.
Great.
Thank you so much, Angela. Thank you very much for that, Samke. Thank you very, very much.